Good afternoon and welcome to our Heritage Kitchener Committee meeting for February. And we will try and move along as quickly as we can because I'm sure everybody has a loaded agenda. And thank you to the members who are here this afternoon. And we will now proceed with item number 2, disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. And so pecuniary interest deals with mainly any item that is on our agenda this week, this month. So are there any items? And as you're aware, there is a form that we're to fill out ahead of time and give to Mariah, indicating what that conflict is. Thank you very much. There were items that were distributed to each of you, I believe today. One was an email from Neil Varda regarding the property at Ontario and Weber. There was another one by Hal Yeager on the same item, and then there was another email piece of information from Gail Poole, which has to do with the property on Margaret Avenue. So I hope that everyone got that. Thank you. I just wanted to ask Mariah, the minutes of the last meeting came out just today, at least in my mailbox. And I wonder if we could have them a little sooner than next time. I know it's starting and we're into this together beginning, so thank you, Mariah, for looking after that. All right, I will now open the floor to our delegations, and our discussion item has to do with, first of all, item 4.1, the draft heritage impact assessment, 1198 Fisher-Holman Road, DSD 2023-050, and our planner, heritage planner Diksha Chowdhury, will do an overview. And I'd ask the members to hold your questions until after the applicant has spoken and done the presentation. All right, so Diksha, would you like to begin? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the first item on the agenda is a draft HIA for 1198 Fisher-Holman Road. The existing house is neither listed nor designated under the Ontario Heritage Act, but it is included on our inventory of historic buildings. It was built in circa 1885 and is representative of the Ontario farmhouse style of architecture. The proposed development includes the demolition of the existing house and all the other structures on the property to make way for a residential development. The HIA has concluded that the existing house would be eligible for designation under the OHA, having historical, design, and contextual value, but it is recommending not to designate it because its integrity has been severely compromised due to its relocation and a lot of alterations over the years. The applicant's heritage consultant is here to answer any questions that the committee might have. At this time, heritage planners are seeking input from the committee with regards to this HIA. Thank you.
Sorry. At this time, would Rachel Redshaw from MHBC Planning be here to do a presentation? Thank you, Rachel. Welcome. And I'm going to ask you to lean into the microphone.
Okay.
Because a few of us have a little difficult hearing. And amplification, as you know, you probably read, it needs updating. So
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So my name is Rachel Redshaw. I'm from MHPC Planning, and I'm here on behalf of Activa, and I'm going to provide you with a very brief overview of the Heritage Impact Assessment for 1198 Fisher Hallman Road, Kitchener. Next slide. As Diksha, oh, that's me. I'm used to Zoom meetings. So the location is the northeast corner of Fisher Hallman and Bleem. So anyone from Kitchener would be just south of the Williamsburg Plaza or the Sunrise Plaza. And then I provided sort of a broader contextual view showing the development around that site. As Diksha mentioned, it is neither listed, designated, it's not within a cultural heritage landscape. However, it was identified in an inventory, and as well as in 2012 in a more general cultural heritage assessment by MHPC, and therefore heritage impact assessment was requested. In terms of existing built features and landscape features, there's a 1.5 story home with a rear addition, and then there is a contemporary outbuilding. In terms of landscape features, it's open green space with sporadic vegetation. So just a brief historical overview, this is my favorite part, not much time. So it is part of the Bechtel Tract, and it is within the former hamlet of Williamsburg. The house was actually constructed circa 1855 by Conrad Head, and he was an immigrant from Germany, and he came here with his father. So you can see the lots are small, but they were small lots. It wasn't intended for farming. Conrad is identified as a spinning wheel maker in 1861. Head family lived there approximately between 1855 and 1867, and afterwards was owned by several families of German descent. We have Weber, Detzler, Reich, Goldbeck, and Sherrill, and the current tenant is a member of the Sherrill family. So the property was historically used for orchards and small-scale hobby farming. So the map on the left is 1861, and then just to the right is 1881. In the latter half of the 20th century, the house was relocated for the widening of Fisher Hallman Road. In 1981, I just pulled an excerpt from the Tweedsmuir histories. It shows local families and farming, the farming community, so it was certainly a rural community still then. However, has dramatically changed since then, and several buildings and structures have been removed for redevelopment. The original barn on the property, as well as an outbuilding, was recently, removed. The new outbuilding was constructed in 2018 that you saw on the other slide. So in terms of cultural heritage value or interest, the property includes a dwelling constructed circa 1855, which is representative of the Ontario Farmers, or otherwise referred to as the Loyalist home or Loyalist Ontario home. It is one of the last remaining buildings from the former hamlet of Williamsburg. So we do have the school, which is designated under Part 4, and then we have this dwelling. And the property is historically linked to its surroundings. So in terms of heritage attributes, it's quite limited. We have the overall scale and massing of the house, the original low-pitched gabled roof line, the remaining original door and some window openings, and the proximity to the intersection of Bleems and Fisher Hallman Road, which was the primary intersection of the Williamsburg community. Now, we did do an investigation of integrity. This is actually a recommendation in the 2012 Cultural Heritage Assessment. So we had Tacoma come in. Nick Lawler, who's the member of Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals, came in and did an assessment of the home. Unfortunately, it was essentially gutted. We learned that through oral history as well as observing the building ourselves. And after the investigation, he concluded that there's little to no historic fabric remaining on the interior of the home, and there's no significant structural features were noted that would make the construction of the home historically significant. So we have the loss of the original foundation. The house was then clad in stucco. You can see that the original center door was then infilled and covered with stucco, and then the house, the interior of the house was gutted. In terms of the proposed development, we're looking at 411 multiple residential units. So there's two 14-story towers and a 3-story podium, 96 stacked townhouse units, 51 3-story cluster townhouse dwellings. And to facilitate that development, all buildings and structures will be removed from the site. So when we look at an impact analysis, there's a moderate impact of destruction, as all the identified heritage attributes will be removed, but there has been several alterations to that building that have compromised the integrity of its original features. So when we identify impact, we have to look at alternative development options. So the first one would be approaching preservation. Seeing that there are fewer heritage attributes remaining, this option is not recommended. There's restoration. However, there have been several non-reversible renovations, and we also have a lack of documentation of the original building, which limits potential for restoration. Then there's the approach of rehabilitation. Again, there's limited heritage features, and replacing those, for example, would remove all value that is there. And relocation, now when we have discussion of the loss of integrity, it challenges the rationale for relocation, and then relocation off-site would disassociate from its historical context. So if the development were to proceed as proposed, we're recommending the completion of an interpretation plan that acknowledges the historical, associative, and historical contextual value of the property. And that's just a little clip again from Tweesmer showing the Williamsburg corners from 1966. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And now we'll open it to questions. So, who would like to ask one? Just put your hand up. Peter, thank you.
I think I have it. Thank you. 411 units total in the property. The apartment building is on the two apartment buildings and an amenity space are on top of a parking garage. In the scheme of things.
In the scheme of things, yeah, we were just focused more so on the building, but yeah, if you were talking about the proposed development.
Yeah.
Yeah, could you repeat that question again?
So just to confirm that there's two apartment buildings and an amenity building that sits on top of the parking garage.
I believe so, yeah, and the question is if that's the case?
Yes, yeah. Just making sure I'm reading this correctly.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, I don't know if, I have Pierre Chauvin here, who's is on the planning side, on the general planning, that could comment if he's permitted to do so. Might have a more detailed response for you if that's okay.
I'm sorry, I'm having a really hard time hearing what you're saying.
If you will lean in.
Yeah, so I know I keep forgetting. Just through the chair, I was wondering, I have Pierre Chauvin here, and he's on the general planning for the project, and I was wondering if he'd be permitted to respond to this question, as he probably would have more details versus me. I'm focused more on the cultural heritage value ranges of the property, but if he wants more details on the proposed development.
That's okay? Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, the question on amenity space, there's two components to it. There's actually surface green space within the development, upwards of over an acre in space, and then there's also rooftop amenity space as well as there will be proposed indoor amenity space in the apartments.
Right. So the parking podium has the two towers on it and an amenity space, an amenity building in between them.
Correct.
Okay. So if I was living in the townhouses, how would I get to that amenity space? What's my path of travel?
Through you, Madam Chair, there is a surface, like I said, a surface amenity space that will be accessible to the townhouse development. The townhouse, people who reside in the townhouses would likely not have access to the apartment amenity space. It's planned to be a separate condo, so they will have their own amenity space, but yet still have access to that surface. So.
Okay. So it's the apartments, the parking podium, and that is one sort of separate condominium unit, and it doesn't cross with the other ones.
That's the intention, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Just one last question. Has there been any investigation into the feasibility of moving the building? I know the conclusion says no, but has there been an engineering report? Has there been somebody who moves buildings that has looked at it and given us a professional opinion?
Yeah, through the chair, so as part of the assessment done by Tacoma Engineers, they were focused more on the assessment of the integrity of the building. It has been relocated before, so there was an assumption, there wasn't specific study done for that, but assumption that it could be relocated, but it was we were questioning the integrity of the house itself and the rationale for relocating it if there is no integrity, really limited integrity left. In terms of the heritage value of the house and those tangible heritage features.
So have you had any report from a professional building mover as to the feasibility of being able to move that building?
So through the chair, typically we go down that road if we determine that the building has integrity, it's has remaining physical features to rationalize the relocation of the building. Again, in this point, we got to the point where we determined that a significant amount of the integrity has been lost, and therefore did not spend efforts to determine if it could be relocated, even though there was a verbal discussion about that prior to that assessment being done on site. We did discuss relocation, and typically when houses have been relocated in the past, typically, they can be relocated again, but that's an assumption. We would need to do a thorough assessment of that. But again, after the assessment was done on the integrity, it was determined that it was nonsensical to proceed with that discussion.
So the answer is no, that you did not have any professional moving company give an opinion upon the viability of its moving.
Yeah, through the chair, we did not have a professional moving company write a brief on whether it could be relocated. Correct.
Thank you.
If I may, Peter, once the delegation has sat down, would you like to make a further statement on that?
No, I would wait until the end to make a
Fine.
statement.
Thank you. Other questions for Rachel? Councillor Chapman.
I'm waiting for you to turn it on for me. Sorry. Can you tell us, like, you talk about the integrity of the building, which was somewhat compromised with the move, and you talked a bit about the interior of the building or the house, but the outside seems to be intact. Is that correct?
Through the chair, the original form is there, and we do have a few window openings, but it's sort of been stuccoed into place, I guess, right? Because the interior has been gutted, it was basically back to the studs. And then, I mean, the house was built in 1855, so obviously they were trying to make it so that it's reasonable to live in, but it was stripped from the inside, so we basically have the form there and the openings, but essentially because of that stucco render that's there.
But there were no additions built onto the house?
So through the chair, there was a rear sort of like a summer kitchen kind of addition, and that was post the relocation.
Okay, that's right. I recall the image. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ilona, do you have one question?
So there's a barn on the property as well, and that was built in 2018. What is going to happen to that structure?
Through the chair, old buildings and structures will be removed for the development.
So will it be demolished completely, or will it be salvaged in any way? It seems like such a shame to destroy such a recent structure.
Through the chair, I don't know the exact answer for that. I'm assuming that it's metal, so I'm assuming that they will be salvaging it because it's a good quality material. Okay, through the chair, it will be salvaged.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ilona. Natalie, you have a question.
Yes, so there was mention of mature vegetation in the report and landscape features. What is the proposal? Is it all to be completely cut out? What's going to happen with all those? Because, I mean, they're, again, mature vegetation, and, you know, with cities sprawling right now, it's kind of hard to come across.
Through the chair, so in terms of maintaining existing landscape features?
Yes. Is there plans to keep any, you know, mature trees, anything on the property, or is it just completely they're going to be removed?
If you'll indulge me, I can answer that through you, Madam Chair. Yes, we're going through a site plan process, and as part of that, we have to prepare a tree management plan. The reality is, with a lot of the trees on the site and development that we're proposing, many of which will be removed. Should be noted that a lot of the trees are ornamental trees, as you can appreciate. The person who had lived there before had planted, I think there are some ornamental apple trees, fruit trees, those types of things, but there are, yes, large spruce trees on the property that will be removed.
Thank you. I do have a few questions. First of all, a small orchard is acknowledged in the report, and we know that there are special types of apple trees like Talanan, Banana, Snow. Those are old-fashioned brands that are hard to come by today. Have you had an arborist look at the orchard material?
Yes, through you, we have. I can't say specifically what type of apple trees were identified. We can look into that and come back to you with that list of trees that have been identified.
Sorry, you would come back with the information?
We can certainly provide that through staff if they have those plans, but we can certainly list that list of apple species through staff.
Right. I'm just recommending that there are those growers that are looking to have the old brands like this, and they come to the market and they're trying to rejuvenate them. So it would be sad if they were just done away with.
Yeah, I'm not an arborist or a specialist in apple trees by any stretch, but like I said, we'll pull that list of apple trees and circulate it through to your staff, and if there are those that are specimens that are worthy, I'm sure we can work out an arrangement.
Very good, thank you. Another concern of mine, we have a great dig going on, an archaeological dig on the other side of Fisher Holman and Bleens, indicating the indigenous history of the community. It's very substantial. And I'm wondering, have you had an archaeological study in this particular property?
Me again. Yes, we have done an archaeological assessment, and believe it or not, it's turned up clean, in a sense, and that has been submitted to the ministry.
So does staff have this information? They do, I'm being told. That was submitted with our site plan application. Right. All right, I'll further that when we're finished with the delegation. It's really a shame to see the rolling hill topography in this area disappear, and I realize that it's very difficult when you have such an intensive development, but what have you, in your planning experience and with the developer, done to think about the rolling landscape that exists, and it's probably one of the last in that area? Do you have any comments about that? Go ahead, you can try.
Through the chair, it's a good question. It is, I'm from that area, I'm from North Dumfries, but I've been past this property several times, and it's something that I note. It's a challenge, between development and cultural heritage and landscape features, and just trying to find the balance. And to be honest, I don't have a perfect answer for you today. I think it's a really good point to raise, and, should be discussed further, but at this point in time, I don't have a straight answer for you.
Right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can add, we certainly, through the design process, we obviously look at the topography and try to work with the land, its natural drainage. And you'll know, if you look at the way the site has been designed, it works, it's highest at Rockwood, and it drops down towards Bleams. And so we're not altering the grades or filling the site to bring everything up. We're actually working with the grades and working downwards from Rockwood all the way down to Bleams. So the homes are tiered down. So it's not like we're trying to severely alter. Yes, we have to achieve positive drainage and provide for servicing to these lands in a proper way. Things move downhill. And so we have to, again, working with the grades and working with the development, try to come up with a design that sort of works with what we have. But recognizing, yes, it will be changed from what it is today, for sure.
Thank you very much. Any more questions from the committee? Well, thank you very much for your work and presentation. And now we'll go back to staff and committee. And any comments, questions that you have for staff about this proposal? Yes, Councillor Chapman.
My question has to do with the reason for the relocation of this house in the first place. I mean, there must have been a reason it was saved, and I mean, what has that reason ended?
Through you, Madam Chair, it was relocated because Fisher Hallman Road was being widened. I'm not completely sure as to the reasons of why it was relocated, but I can look into that and get back to you.
That would be helpful, thank you.
Any other? Peter, I think you had a comment before about moving the house and so on. Did you wish to expand on that for direction to staff?
Yeah, I just wanted to make some comments in general about the development and its approach. I really want to address my comments to the developer, to the owner of the property. I know the representatives are here today. I don't know if the owner is here, but in any case, I guess the thing I was initially, my initial reaction was disappointment that this heritage building is just really so quickly dismissed, right? That it has no value, that it has no ability for reuse, and that it really is, it just gets in the way of the rest of the development. It gets reduced to a line on a pro forma, which is a cost of demolition. And it really surprises me that the developers miss the opportunity of seeing what the potential, what the economic benefits are of the reuse of this building. You know, I think to myself, you know, there's a perfect spot, you know, that this building could be reused for in at the end of that sort of great lawn in the middle of the development. I mean, the building's been moved once. It can be moved again. You know, the building's in rough shape. It can be restored. It can be made better. You know, I think that you're missing an opportunity to use this building to make the overall development better. You know, I imagine this as what this could be as a piece of amenity in the middle of this building, how much better it could be for the people who live there, how much more desirable it would be. It gives you know, this development has a bit of a problem with human scale on its interior street. I mean, its biggest defining element is a 3-story parking garage that is huge. And, this building could be used to mediate some of that scale in those public areas. By reusing this building, you can give a sense of identity and a sense of place, a sense of differentiation to your development that other developments don't have. This sense of history and a sense of place. Reusing this building it is a gift to your marketing department to make a better place to live and a place where people want to live, and where people want to live, and that has a better pedestrian environment, that has a better human scale, they'll pay more money for it. If it's rentals, your rentals will be lower, or your vacancy rates will be lower. The time from when the building is built to stabilized occupancy will be less. All of these are economic arguments for the reuse of the building. And I'm really sorry that you've kind of passed on completely on an attempt to reuse it. And I just hope that you would reconsider that.
I appreciate your comments, Peter, and I do hear it, and it is one of the last, in that area, last essences of the old farm area. And as you pointed out, the house has been moved once before. I wonder, is there a more direct statement or direction to our staff to reevaluate the moving of this house? Do you wish to mention this to staff?
Yeah, I guess that would be a request, is to evaluate the reuse of the building within the development.
I wonder, staff, have you captured the content? Thank you. Ilona, you had a question about the barn, and do you have any comments or recommendations for staff about the barn?
Not at this point. They answered my question in that it will be salvaged to some degree, so it was just a concern that it would go into the landfill when it was still a good building, so.
Thank you, Ilona, and I think staff have heard that. Natalie, do you have anything further to answer or recommend about the trees and the landscaping?
I would just recommend, in current architecture right now, there's a trend of, the minimalist kind of look, and a lot of nature and the natural aspect is kind of lost among it. And it would kind of be a shame to see so many mature trees and shrubbery and all that be ripped out rather than being used within the actual development. Is there any, I don't know if there are any plans to have any sort of new trees or bushes or shrubbery put into the planning of it, but I would also just recommend having, select few trees, maybe being worked into the development plan.
Thank you, Natalie. And I'd just like to sum up once again about the rolling hill topography that exists in that area. And it seems to me that there should be some recognition. I think it was hinted at or indicated that there would be some type of communication within the development, but it would be really good if there was some overview placed somewhere in that development regarding the history of the site, and even some of the pictures that have been captured to include that. And also, I understand that an arborist will come and have a look to see, second look again at this small orchard. I think sugar maple was mentioned in the report, and I'm sure that I do know that there are those who move mature trees and they can be ready for survival. So those are my comments. Any other comments from the committee? Thank you. Moving on then to the draft impact assessment, 149, 151 Ontario Street North and 21 Weber Street West, DSD 2023-048-050. And Diksha, could you make your presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this property is located at the intersection of Ontario Street North and Weber Street West. The existing building is listed as a non-designated property of cultural heritage value on the city's municipal heritage register. The building is most influenced by Italianate architectural style, and it also has some Georgian architectural style influences reflected in its paired chimneys and overall symmetrical design. 21 Weber Street West has no heritage status and is proposed to be demolished. It is also located adjacent to 141 Duke Street West, which is also listed on the city's municipal heritage register, and it is also adjacent to the Civic Center Heritage Conservation District. Staff have been working with the applicant to address some concerns related with the development, and the proposal before the committee today is the most current one. The applicant, owners, and the heritage consultant are here to answer any questions the committee might have. At this time, staff are reviewing the HIA and asking for the committee's input. Thank you.
Thank you, Diksha. And now we will call on Chris Uchima from LHC, Heritage Planning and Archaeology. And again, Chris, if you would please lean in to the microphone, we'll all be able to hear better.
I will do my best. I'm a bit height challenged, though.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so I've prepared just a short presentation. I won't go into too much detail because you've all been provided the Heritage Impact Assessment. I believe this is the next item up. Perfect, thank you very much. And thank you, members of the committee. My name is Chris Uchiyama. I'm a principal and heritage planner at LHC Heritage Planning and Archaeology, Inc. This may be a familiar project to some of you. It's been back and forth in a few different iterations to this committee over the past few years. As Diksha mentioned, the property is located near the intersection of Weber and Ontario Street. It's across from the Civic Center Neighborhood HCD and the Civic Center Neighborhood CHL as well. So the property itself is listed as a non-designated property under Section 27. When LHC first completed an HIA back in 2019 for development of the property, we undertook a great deal of research on the existing conditions and the history of the property in order to confirm and supplement the statement of significance that had been prepared by the city for the listing. We subsequently updated that for this new iteration of the proposal that's before you now, starting in September 2021. And as Diksha mentioned, it was submitted in January 2022, and there's been some back and forth with staff. The owners and the project architecture are also here to answer questions specific to the development more generally. So the property itself that you'll see here, it was evaluated. It was determined to meet several of the criteria from OREG 906. It was constructed around 1876. It was believed to have been constructed as a tenant dwelling, so it was workers' housing, so it was a multi-unit development. It's modest in design, but also has a number of really unique and sort of unexpected Italianate features. It has a number of very intact elements. Some of you may be aware
The property also had a fire back in April of 2022 that resulted in some damage to the upper story as well as significant damage to the roof. Some of that is provided for you in Section 7 of the HIA, just with a bit of an outline, but many of the details that were identified as heritage attributes were unaffected by that fire. So in terms of heritage attributes that were identified, it was the buff brick construction, the symmetrical plan with 2 bay windows along the front there, those symmetrical twin doors, wood brackets, brick coining, the segmentally arched window openings, the soirs with drip mold, and the doors with transom, and the 2 brick chimneys on either side. So the properties themselves are quite constrained. They're small properties, and what is proposed is a 27-story tower with 206 dwelling units. An earlier iteration of this proposal had looked to cantilever the building over top of the existing duplex. That proved to be quite impossible and not really feasible with the other site constraints. So the proposal that you have before you seeks to retain the front east facade, the majority of the south return of that front portion of the building. The addition would be removed, and a partial north return as well next to the accessible vestibule there to the side. So this is a view of the south elevation. So a great deal of that wall is retained. You retain the coining, the sort of shape and scale of the building, as well as the pitch. Here's a view from a pedestrian level looking at the south and east facades. Straight on view, it's a bit further back than you might be able to see as a pedestrian, but you get a sense of the fact that the front of the building will be completely visible. And this is a view coming from looking at the north return and the front facade of the building, that glass facade, in order to make the vestibule larger and accessible. Not as much of the north return will be retained. Okay, so I'm flying through these slides. So given that retention of the building was explored and found not to be viable, partial demolition and selective deconstruction was identified as the preferred option within the HIA. This alternative sees that the facade, partial north and south returns retained and integrated into the new development. The roof itself the pitch of the roof will be retained. As mentioned, it was significantly damaged in the fire, and it's proposed to be replaced with a glass roof to allow light into the building inside. The front of the building will be retained pretty much in situ. The front steps are proposed to be replaced, though they're currently wooden front steps in not great condition. They're proposed to be replaced with seating that would be compatible with the facade and the rest of the retained elements. A number of mitigative measures have been proposed in order to lessen the impacts, although there certainly will be impacts to the heritage attributes. To the extent possible, LHC has recommended that the existing wooden windows and door cases be retained and repaired in order to support the efficiency of the windows, that new inserts and storm windows could be installed rather than entirely new windows. This approach will have to be reassessed following the fire, as some of the windows in the upper stories were affected by that fire. The biggest piece here in terms of moving forward is that a conservation plan is proposed to be undertaken to ensure the proper conservation of materials as the project progresses. Tacoma Engineering, primarily Nick Lawler, who is a member of the Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals, has been involved to date, has done a number of structural assessments to come up with some strategies for the retention of the retained facades, as well as the careful deconstruction of the pieces of the building that are to be removed.
Thank you. We're happy to to answer questions or to take comments back to the design team.
All right, thank you very much, and now we're open to questions from our committee. Ilona, would you have a question?
So yes, I do have some questions. So you focused a lot of attention on the structure that we have there right now. And it is considered to be a heritage asset. The way that I see it underneath that, the new build, is it seems to be overshadowed and tucked in underneath. It's really very difficult to really see it very well. And I realize that moving the building itself might be a challenge, but were there any other design considerations, any kind of other designs that were considered for this?
Yeah, so there were a number of designs that were considered, and perhaps I can invite the project architect to discuss some of the choices that were made to get to the iteration that we see today.
So, my name is Rima Mazri. I'm an architect for the project. So the site is pretty tight. So in order to be able to build an apartment building that has a sufficient core and units around the core, we need the entirety of the site. And unfortunately, the existing building is positioned backed from the front of the site. So we chose to respect that and leave the building where it is. And then we went 3 to 4 stories high and then cantilevered our building on above the existing building. We thought that we left enough space around and above the building to not to overshadow it. There was a previous design that was done previous to my involvement and the developer's involvement, which enclosed the existing building is in a glass facade. So we dropped that as an option for many reasons, but in terms of heritage assessment, it was, although the glass facade would appear to that it is preserving the existing building, but it was, from my perspective at least, it is creating a barrier between the pedestrian and the building. And it also prevents the building from being experienced the way it has been all these years. So we chose to keep it open to the pedestrian realm instead of enclosing it in the glass.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. Can I ask, and you may have said this and I may have missed it in the report, but what are you going to use the building for?
The building will be part of the main lobby, of the residential lobby.
So the interior will be kept as...
Well, the interior of the building right now is bedrooms and kitchen and bathroom, so all that will be removed. There is no heritage value to that, and functionally it wouldn't work. So all that is going to be removed, but we'll keep the walls, the exterior walls, so that when you enter into the lobby, you can see the back side of the existing building. You can see the windows and the doors from the inside.
Could you pull the building up again so I could look at it, please? Yeah, I guess it just looks like it's kind of just sitting in there. It doesn't look like it's been incorporated really well. And I don't know, maybe this is just the drawing or the design, and maybe it's the white with the brick on the building. Like, is there any way to incorporate like change some of that?
I think that the intention under the Heritage Act and our discussions with Heritage staff and with Chris was to juxtapose the building, not to integrate it into the new structure, so that each has its own identity. I think Heritage Act talks about when you add to an existing building, you should try not to kind of duplicate it or imitate it, so that it stands with its own character. And I think that's appropriate from design perspective, because we're building now in the 21st century. Our materials and our technology is different, and I think the design expresses that. So that was the intention with the choice of materials and colors.
Yeah, it reminds me, I don't know if Councillor Chapman remembers a building that came to council. I think it was on Weber and, what's it, that one on the corner? Remember when it was just like this? They put the, yeah. Anyways, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Michaud. Any other questions from our members? Yes, Peter, to the delegation.
This is the third time that we've seen this building in front of the committee, and excuse me. The first time it came up, I was quite impressed that the building itself was going to be retained, and that it was going to be and kept in that same relationship between the building and the sidewalk, that the historical relationship. And that, I thought, was a really exciting part of that. And then it came back to the committee again, and it was the glassed-in version, right? The kind of heritage snow globe, that was very pretty. But, I found it problematic, too, that suddenly heritage is the purvey of private property only. So now the proposal is back in front of us, and I got to say that you've really addressed some of the problems in the previous schemes here really nicely. The one that I think is really good is all the previous schemes really struggled with the slope of the roof on the existing building, and giving it that sort of extra clear story on top of it is great. It works really well. It works so much better. So I think there's a lot to be commended here, and I really like the fact that instead of just the sort of flat facade attached to another building, is you actually get the sort of spatial sense of the whole massive building with the roof in there. It's really admirable. The part that is I think could be improved or could have some more attention to it is the new relationship between the historic building and the sidewalk, right? Which was previously, the sort of front entrance to the building, and now it's a couple of planters and a bench, right? It's it's under it faces north. It's under a big overhang. It's not very ambitious, right? Design-wise, and I think that it could. If there's one spot that I could suggest, like bringing some design power to it, is that space in between the building and the sidewalk again, because I think there's a real opportunity there to even make this scheme even better. So that would be my recommendation of what to look at.
Sorry, through you, Chair. Would you please elaborate? We made an attempt to make that space memorable. That's why we're putting seats and they're kind of a take on the steps that were there, but they're incorporating seating as well. We put some planters around those hexagonal window projections, but we'd like to hear if you have other suggestions that can be achieved.
Well, I don't have the solution. I'm just stating the problem.
Okay, thank you. Fair enough.
Any other questions from committee members? Yes, Natalie?
Just looking at the design with the posts, I understand obviously they're there to support the whole building. From the design, it kind of looks as though like they're in the middle of the sidewalk. Is that the case, or are they off the sidewalk?
They're within the property boundary.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
I have another question.
Oh, sorry. Ilona?
Yes, so I'm also wondering about the height of the building, given that the surrounding, I think in the description that you had provided in the HIA, it states that most of the other buildings are around 19 stories, but this proposed building is 27 stories. Is there a rationale for the increased height, for the additional height in this building? Like, I guess a big concern for us, I'm from the Civic Center neighborhood, and a big concern for us is the shadowing that that would create on a portion of our heritage district. Was that taken into consideration at all in designing the building?
There are 30 and 40-story buildings in the vicinity, and I think the landscape of downtown Kitchener is changing. So there will be more buildings after this. I presume that that's the characteristic of a successful city. The zoning allows for this height, so that's why I'm saying there'll be more buildings. In terms of shadowing, we did a shadow analysis just because the way the building is located, surrounded by two streets. The street is Weber Street on our north. Most of the shadows will be falling onto the streets.
I think that the height of the building, though, would really cast a lot of shadows over as far as Roy Street and maybe even further, given the height of the building. We have looked at that from other proposals for that area, and there was a significant impact on Roy Street. We've had a couple of residents put forth some concerns about how it could impact the viability of the neighborhood with the additional shadows that would be cast over top. So that is a very big concern for us.
No, and if I may, through the chair, I think that that's really helpful for us to know going back in terms of strengthening the HIA and providing additional information, and that's something that we can certainly provide, sort of strengthen the discussion and add more information into the HIA so that information is available for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ilona. I'm seeing no other questions for the delegation. Thank you very much. And we do also have Neil Barda. Neil, are you here? Yes, you are. Thank you. So come forward, lean into the mic, and make your presentation. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the topic, Madam Chair. My name is Neil Barda, and I live at 31 Roy Street, Kitchener. My property backs onto the parking lot directly across Weber from the applicant's property. And I request that Heritage Kitchener also take a look at shadow study for this proposal and a 45-degree angular plane analysis starting from the rear property lines of the low-rise builds on Roy Street, which are the nearest residential properties. The subject property is across the street from the Civic Center Heritage District, and the height and the shadows will affect the neighborhood. I had asked for some slides to be shown. Can we see slide 1?
Bear with me, my computer is frozen. It'll be up shortly.
Okay, thanks. So I think there we go, slide 1. So I'd played around with some software online, looking at shadows, but I would like Heritage Kitchener to have access to a more complete and precise shadow study to evaluate the impact of this tall building on the neighborhood. Slide 2, please. So the earlier delegation mentioned that there were other properties that were ripe for development, and, oh, sorry, slide 2 was the previous one. Yeah, so that's the neighboring properties captured as well. And if they go to similar sorts of heights, the shadow effects are increased. So from fall through spring, myself and my neighbors will be in shadow for a significant chunk of the afternoon. And slide 3. Right, so my second concern is that the proposed 93.2 meter height of the building protrudes through the 45-degree angular plane protection that the Heritage District Plan applies to the residential properties on Roy Street. I used Google Map distance measurement from the back corner of my property to the corner of the proposed building and came up with approximately 72 meters. So anything above 72 meters would protrude through that 45-degree angular plane. I'd like Heritage Kitchener to be able to evaluate the transition to the Heritage District residential properties, and the 45-degree angular plane seems like a good tool for that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Neil. Are there any questions for Neil from our committee members? Shannon, do you have a? No, thank you.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Neil.
you.
And we do have your circulation as well. Thank you. So now back to the committee. If you have any further comments or direction to staff. Yes, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I just had a question about the 45-degree angular plane. Can you just give us your take on it and some information on that, please?
So through you, Madam Chair, an angular plane analysis is required in the Heritage Conservation District if a proposed development is higher than 5 stories. Staff right now are reviewing the HIA and we'll be getting back to the applicant on certain requirements for further information on that HIA.
But that doesn't really address the question about the angular plane.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, could you elaborate the question, please?
Well, there are concerns from the resident about the 45-degree angular plane. I just wondered what staff's take on that was.
Yep, so through you, Madam Chair, a 45 angular degree plane analysis is required for developments within the HCD. The plan does not provide clear direction as to how it should be acted out in terms of adjacent properties. That being said, staff right now are reviewing the HIA and this proposed development, and if there's a need, we will get back to the applicant.
Councillor Chapman, do you have any more questions on that? Yes, Elona?
I think that we need to really strongly consider the angular plane analysis and the shadowing that the building will create, because I think it's going to have an impact on the viability of Roy Street, and it'll have a serious impact on our neighborhood. Any developments that begin to encroach on our district will decrease the cultural landscape of it, and it will have a significant impact on it. So I think that needs to be taken into great consideration.
Thank you, Alona. Any other comments? So I think there's clear concern expressed about the shadow study, the angular plane, the plane analysis, the front entrance, and the relationship of the historic building to the sidewalk. I too had my concerns about, yes, we're removing the wooden steps and we're closing off those doors. However, I do believe that there are now certain type of products that may resemble the wood rather than concrete. I'm very much bothered by concrete, and as you know, if it isn't done properly, it too will crack and wane away. So I would like something to be looked at that is more conducive to the old house, this historic property. The other concern I had is the design of the building on Weaver Street, the new building. It seems to me the pedestrian level, it's floor-to-ceiling glass, and really it's very hardscape for the pedestrians to be walking past. So I wonder if that could be looked at. And I just wondered, in the other presentations, as Peter alluded to prior presentations, the difference, and compared to now, we see the pillars, and that middle pillar that's in the front of the building, it does concern me as to sort of cutting off the view of that, of the historic property. So I think we've captured it all, and staff will let you take it away and see what you can work on. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for those who have made presentations, and for the resident, Neil Barta, coming forward and making a presentation. And now we're going to move on to 43 Margaret, sorry, 30 to 40 Margaret Avenue, Draft Heritage Impact Assessment, DSD 2023-057. And Jessica, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So 30 to 40 Margaret Avenue is located on the north side of Margaret Avenue within the Civic Centre Neighbourhood Heritage Conservation District, and it's designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The subject property was formerly the site of several significant mansions, which were demolished in the 80s and 90s, and it's remained vacant since then. The site represents the single largest vacant lot in the HCE, and it's been subject to other site plan applications, the most previous one being in 2019 for a 6-story multiple dwelling unit. This proposal is for the development of 8 blocks of townhomes, 3 stories in height, for a total of 48 dwelling units. There is a single vehicle access point provided via Margaret Avenue, as well as 52 parking spots, most of which are located within individual garages, as well as a park located on the east side of the site. The HIA concluded that the proposal would have little to no impacts on the HCD when considering the impacts outlined by info sheet number 5 of the Heritage Toolkit. At this time, staff are seeking input from the committee on this HIA.
Thank you, Jessica. And now, Rachel, are you coming to make another presentation?
I guess I can say good evening. I think it's around that time.
Lean in.
So I'm back, Rachel Recha from MHBC on behalf of Activa. I also have Andrew from Martin Simmons Swears and Pierre Chauvin from MHBC. So Pierre for any detailed planning questions and Andrew for any detailed architectural questions. So quick recap of what Jessica said. Location is in downtown Kitchener, adjacent, at the intersection of Margaret and Queen, so just by the Kitchener Public Library and Center in the Square. Quick background, as Jessica mentioned, originally the subject lands included 6 mansions which were demolished in the late 1980s, early 1990s. So this plot of land has been vacant for some time now. There were previous proposals in 2013 and 2019. Just at the bottom hand corner there, you can see the most recent proposal. Well, not anymore, but in 2019, it was approved by the Heritage Committee. It was a 6-story apartment with 234 units and a 2-level underground parking garage. In terms of the heritage status, the subject lands are designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. They're located within the Civic Center Neighborhood Heritage Conservation District. In terms of adjacent heritage status, there are adjacent contiguous 16 properties. We have 54 Margaret Avenue to the west of the subject lands, the Church of the Good Shepherd and the Coach House to the east, and 14 residential properties along Ellen Street west on the north. The Church of the Good Shepherd is also designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. It was designated in 1985, so some years before the district, and the designation is particular to the wrought iron fence around the church. Existing conditions, well, the properties, the subject lands are vacant, and they include approximately 20 mature trees. Proposed development is 8 blocks of townhouses with a total of 48 dwelling units and 53 parking spaces. As Jessica mentioned, the parking is individual parking garages that are internal to the site, so they wouldn't be visible from the public realm. In terms of landscaping, there are again 20 trees. 18 of those are retained. The 2 that are being removed are because they are of ill health. And then there is a conceptual rendering of what the rear yards would look like. So these are colored renderings of the proposed development. To the left, you're going to see a rendering from Margaret Avenue. So there's a variation in architectural articulations. We have step backs. There's individual porches, and then contrasting or a variation of materials and colors. So the materials are of a neutral palette, which is what you would see in the district, and we're including materials such as brick, wood, and copper, which are also common in the district. To the right is a rendering showing the internal laneway. And then the left-hand corner is just the architect's comparative analysis between historic architecture in the area and its influence on the contemporary design. In terms of the impact analysis, we did review the policies and guidelines within the plan. Now, there are several policies and guidelines to look at. We responded to over 35, so certainly don't have time to go through those today, but we're going to quickly go through some that are particular to Margaret Avenue. So these are policies and guidelines that are specific to Margaret Avenue. Sorry, they look quite minuscule, but I'm going to go through quickly. The first one is about maintaining residential character. So multiple separate residential units, step backs, and landscape features were designed to maintain that residential character. It does request underground parking. In this case, there is not underground parking. However, there are individual parking garages internal to the site. The redevelopment should be of a height, sitting, and design, which will prevent encroaching on low-density dwellings. The height is 3 stories, so similar to the height of the Church of the Good Shepherd, and minimally higher than surrounding residential buildings. It talks about establishing a strong pedestrian-oriented streetscape. So again, there's individual walkways, treed boulevard, and elements such as these to maintain that pedestrian-oriented street. Any proposals over 5 stories would be required to do shadow studies. In this case, it's 3 stories, so it does not apply. And then encouraging the incorporation of existing trees. Again, 18 out of 20 will be retained. And a traffic study was not requested. Now, these are site area-specific design guidelines for Margaret Avenue in section 6.9.1. It talks about a maximum front yard setback of 10 meters. The front yard setback is approximately 3 meters. It fluctuates, but it's within that range. Minimum rear yard setback of 10 to 15 meters. For the most part, it meets that, but the rear yard setback also fluctuates as well, so there are some areas where it does not meet that. Building stepbacks are encouraged for developments over 3 to 4 stories. Now, this development is 3 stories, but it does incorporate stepbacks. And then it talks about a high degree of building articulation in architectural details. The use of individual porches, the variety of step backs and materials and colors have been used to create that high degree of building articulation. It says details could include cornices, pilasters, varied roof lines, etc. And so the architect has taken these elements or features to inspire the contemporary design. And then it talks about creating transition in building width and massing, so that it's visually into smaller units or sections. So again, we have 17 entrances, we have step backs, and we have slightly varying front yard setbacks. Then it talks about the use of brick and stone. The proposed development is using brick. Parking will not be permitted in the front yard. It's not in the front yard, it's internal to the site. And lastly, again, talks about the retention of trees, and again, they'll be keeping 18 out of the 20. So in review of the policies and guidelines, it meets the majority of these within the HCD plan. Now, in terms of the Ontario Heritage Toolkit, we looked at beneficial and adverse impacts. There is a beneficial impact. The vacancy has created a void along Margaret Avenue streetscape. It was historically for residential buildings. So infill in this case is recommended as a form of conservation for the general rhythm of the neighborhood and in particular the streetscape of Margaret Avenue. And then there's a negligible adverse impact for the removal of those 2 trees from the subject lands. Landscape features are important to the HCD. This is just a quick slide now. The previous development, 2019, required vibration monitoring, and within that context, we are looking at a 2-level underground parking garage. That's not the case here. The closest dwelling or building is 54 Margaret Avenue, which is approximately 10 meters away. The excavation will be similar to an excavation for a conventional basement for a single-family dwelling, so we're not anticipating any impacts of land disturbances. In terms of mitigation measures, we're looking at tree replacement. Any new trees should be indigenous to the area. I'm running out of time here. In terms of commemoration, now there were, as Jessica mentioned, 6 mansions, and if you're a history buff in the area, you might recognize some of these names. So we're encouraging that some of these names, or one of them at least, be used within the park, and then possibly use remaining foundation stones in the park design. So this is actually a view, a close view of the houses, 2 of them that were formerly there. Now, again, I have Andrew here to answer any questions regarding architecture, and Pierre for any detailed questions regarding planning. And I can answer any questions for Heritage. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I do remember these 2 houses situated, and you see before you in the historical view of the subject lands. It is a shame that they were demolished, and they could have been fitted in very nicely to some townhouse development. However, at the time, the developer did not see fit to keep them, sadly. Now, committee members, questions and comments? Sure. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I just wondered, I seem to recall when this came to us before, there were concerns with 54 Margaret, and I just wondered if those concerns had been addressed with this new design. And I don't remember specifically what those concerns were, but I do remember there were concerns there.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. The concern really was a matter of height and compatibility with respect to 54 Margaret and ensuring appropriate distance in angular plane. Since we're at a 3-story now, that's really not an issue. So that has been addressed.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Ilona, do you have a question or comments?
Well, I do appreciate that the design that you've brought forward is townhouses, so it does fit into the neighborhood a little bit better than a taller build would. It's got the articulations, it's got the a small parquet that's included in the landscaping, and so in that sense, I think it does suit the neighborhood. But I'm wondering about the materials that are used as a veneer and the cladding for the outside. Why was the type of material that is being proposed chosen?
Through you, Madam Chair, we chose a buff or cream-colored brick, which we find is specific to the heritage of Waterloo. If you go throughout southern Ontario, you'll see some cream and some red, but in our local area, that is a bit unique, that a lot of our heritage buildings, whether factory or residential, and throughout the Civic Center district, have that buff brick, that cream-colored brick. And then you'll notice a lot with the other heritage residential buildings, they use a secondary color to highlight that brick with the detailing. So we chose a dark wood siding to contrast and kind of highlight the push and pull of the facade along Margaret and increase the impact of the rhythm along the towns.
So the majority of what I see when I look at the proposed design is concrete.
Where do you see concrete?
Could you pull up the pictures, Mariah?
There are some low landscape walls that the materiality has yet to be determined, but there is no concrete as far as facade material. The main material you see there, it might just be because the images are a bit dark, but that is a buff brick. You can see it highlighted on the bottom row of circles to the left. We have a compare and contrast with the Heritage House across the street, 31 Margaret, and we go material for material.
The other comment that I have then is in relation to the shape. So it looks very square or rectangular, whereas the rest of the neighborhood has peaked roofs. These are flat roofs. Is there a reason why the flat was chosen?
Yes, so we're providing rooftop terraces for these facing Margaret because we've put the parking at the rear, which is one of the requests of the Heritage plan, is to conceal the parking. Which eliminated the ability for these towns specifically to have any rear yard. So we have a rooftop terrace, which requires a flat roof. Also, we are drawing from the typology of Victorian townhouses, which were often flat roofed.
No other comment right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ilona. Yes, Councillor Michaud.
Yes, thank you. I just want to comment that I think these look lovely, and I think that they're going to be real, I mean, that property's been vacant for quite some time, and they're going to be a real, I don't know, they're just going to look great in the neighborhood, and I think sometimes bringing old in with new, you've done a really great job of incorporating that. I think that I would like to live there. These look really great.
Thank you, Councillor Michaud. Any other comments? Yes, Peter.
It was really interesting to see this proposal come back in front of us again, and it was quite a shock to see the difference between the last proposal and this proposal. To go from 240 units to 48 units is not the usual direction that you see in downtown development. But that may not be germane to the topic, but what we have here is remarkably good. It's what is so heartening for me is the relationship of the building to Margaret Street, reestablishing that historical relationship of the front door facing the street of that distance in between, the kind of short walk. It's a great urban condition, and it restores that balance of the sides of the street really well. The scale, that works incredibly well. The materiality, the language of it, I think, is delightful. I think those chimneys are terrific, right? I really can't, find a whole lot of fault with this. I think it's really excellent work, and I hope this one makes it into construction.
Thank you, Peter. Any other comments? There was a submission by the ACO rep, Gail Poole. I do believe you did answer the question about the roof alignment and why there would not be a slanted roof. I have a question with respect to the cladding that is on the sides of the building, the side facing facing Queen Street. Is the cladding different than what you see on the front?
We have various. The cladding wraps the various volumes of the massing as it turns the corner. We are orienting the towns so that the most articulated side facade will be exposed to either the lane entry or the park, depending on how the site plan ends up. And that includes the chimneys that you can see that accentuate the roof line. It is our intention to make sure that there is glazing that articulates the side facades, as well as, again, that push and pull of massing, and that the design that you see that is so striking along Margaret continues around the side and back of the town blocks.
If I may ask, that last picture, which shows proposed development, and oh, here we are. So, which one of these round circles represents what's to go on the side? Is it the bottom right?
It would be all four on the bottom row.
Sorry?
All four of those materials would be on the side facade.
Will go on the side.
Yes.
Is there one that's more than the other?
Off the top of my head, I guess it would be the
Sorry,
brick, but I don't have the side elevation in my head right now.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? So thank you very much for those presenting. And now we'll go to the committee. Any further direction to our staff with respect to this proposal? Ilona?
While I'm not an architect by any means, and I have no architectural training, I think that the interpretation here is more of a brutalist interpretation of what perhaps the guidelines for the district put forth. I think it does need to have more of a rhythm so that it fits more with the neighborhood, and it more closely aligns with the types of buildings that we do have in our neighborhood. Having a flat rooftop, I don't think fits in at all. I think it needs to be more of a peaked rooftop. Even if it's just a peaked facade in the front, it would still add to it. But having just a flat rooftop, I think it's more of a brutalist interpretation of what the neighborhood, the guidelines state in the design. I have a friend of I have a son of a friend of mine who is visiting from Spain, from Barcelona right now, and his first comments were, it really doesn't fit with the vibe. So, I mean, The community itself is built in the 1900s. So many of those buildings are built in the 1900s. And when you put in modern buildings like that, it really doesn't fit in with the character of the neighborhood. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Alona. So staff, I think you have an overview of likes, concerns, dislikes. So thank you very much then for this item. We'll now turn to the Draft Heritage Impact Assessment 8397 Victoria Street North, DSD 2023-049. And Diksha, please present.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this subject property is located near the intersection of Victoria Street North and Weber Street West. The proposed development includes 3 properties, 83, 87, and 97 Victoria Street North. Out of these, only the existing building at 97 Victoria Street North has cultural heritage value. It's listed as a non-designated property on the city's municipal heritage register. The subject properties are also located adjacent to 70 Francis Street North and the Warehouse District Cultural Heritage Landscape. The proposed development includes constructing an additional floor on the existing building and an addition adjacent to the building. This will result in the addition of 44 affordable rental housing units and relocating the St. John's Kitchen to a new 1-story dining hall and community clinic on site. The proposed development has received conditional site plan approval, subject to several heritage planning conditions. And the HIA is still in its draft form and has not been approved yet by the Director of Planning. The applicant's heritage consultant is here to answer any questions the committee might have. Staff at this point are still reviewing the HIA and would like the committee's input on the proposed development. Thank you.
Thank you, Diksha. And I believe Chris will call on you one more time. And don't forget to lean in. Thank you.
Just give a second for the presentation to come up. So again, my name is Chris Uchiyama with LHC. There's also a representative from the Working Center here as well, who may be in better position to answer some of the questions than myself if there's specific project questions. So the property is a familiar one to everyone, I'm sure. It's the circa 1927, it's the former Mitchell Button Factory warehouse. It's located, I have the button, sorry. It's located at the corner of Victoria and Weber Street. It's a 2-story brick building with a front facade that has that sort of stepped parapet and factory windows on the front, although there's been a lot of replacements on the side elevations. There are 2 other buildings on the larger project study area that we didn't look into. They're being retained in situ though, so we really did scope our assessment. When we were retained, we really did scope the assessment to confirming the heritage attributes and the statement of significance through historical research and a review of existing conditions, looking at impacts to those heritage attributes as well as the warehouse CHL and the adjacent heritage property on Francis Street. So 97 Victoria Street North, it's a listed non-designated property under Section 27. And then the listed property at 70 Francis Street North is to the rear of the property. If you walk down Francis Street, they're separated by height. So as I mentioned, one of the things that we did do was an evaluation based on the information in the listing, as well as some supplemental research to look at the evaluation per OREG 906. We determined that it meets several of the criteria. and we identified a number of heritage attributes, which are primarily on the facade, that's very distinctive, but also on the side elevations and that chimney stack as well. So we looked at one of the attributes being the two-story height, that symmetrical northwest primary facade, the flat roof, the shaped parapet on the front, with those that define those distinct bays on each of the building's elevations, built brick construction, those original window openings with soldier course brick headers and concrete sills, the remaining 6/6 windows on the northwest, the primary facade, as you'll see in some of those pictures, the windows on the side elevations have been removed over the years. And aren't the original sort of multi-paned factory windows that one would expect on a building of this type. The chimney as well was identified as a heritage attribute. And then the location of the building, where it sits at that corner and along Victoria Street, and it's linked to the surrounding warehouse CHL. I pressed the wrong button. There we go. Okay, so what's proposed is a one-story addition above that warehouse building. It'll be clad in that sort of black metal, sort of an industrial material. And then, as you'll see in that site plan overview, there's a one-story concrete block addition at the rear is proposed to be removed. It's not a heritage attribute. And then the one-story building is proposed to be constructed along the back to provide additional space for the St. John's Kitchen as well as a community clinic. The addition will support conversion of the building to provide an additional 44 affordable housing units. Here are some additional views of the site plan. The top of the building, the top of the plan there is Victoria Street. So you see the factory building along the right-hand side. The one-story addition is along the bottom there. And then the existing buildings, which are remaining in situ, are in gray up along Victoria Street there. There's also a couple of renderings that give you a sense of the materials being considered to date. One of the things I will draw your attention to, because we did identify it as an impact, is the changes to the windows. An earlier iteration, they had looked at maintaining and replacing some of those vinyl windows that are there now with those multi-pane factory windows. But one of the constraints they came across is that the floor plan, in order to divide the building into the number of affordable units required, interior walls are going to be sort of cutting those windows in half. And so what's proposed, and you'll see in the drawings, is that sort of metal wide bar down the center to hide that walls, those interior walls, provide additional privacy as well for residents and make them a bit more functional than those factory windows would. Okay, so we did identify potential adverse impacts related to the two-story height. Although, as you'll see here, the design of that one-story addition, it mimics the stepped buttress, and then that central sort of hallway space. It's a hallway space that's a window, is meant to sort of reinforce that central piece along the parapet wall. And the materials were chosen specifically to sort of be secondary to and compatible with the warehouse building with the brick walls, but also be more industrial in nature. Other additions to the building, there's a lot of glass being used and the metal and lighter materials throughout, especially in that back one-story addition. Okay, we've recommended that a conservation plan be prepared and that heritage professionals be involved in detailed design and as the actual work into the building is undertaken. So I'm happy to take any questions. Hopefully I can answer them and then take comments back to the project team as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And so now we'll go to committee members. Questions for the delegation? Sure, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I don't have a question, I just have a comment, actually, and I'm very happy to see this. So we are in desperate need of more affordable housing units, and this, as always, the Working Centre pulls through, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Ilona?
Will there be an elevator in the building as well?
Yes, there will be.
I was just thinking about people who might have, disabilities, who might need access to the higher floors, so that's great to hear, thank you.
10% disability units, or accessible units.
So 10% of the units will be accessible units.
Thank you, Ilona. Any other questions? Yes, Natalie.
Just wondering, so just based off the pictures, there seems to be quite a lot of graffiti along the sides. Is there any concern that removal of graffiti would damage the brick or any of that?
So graffiti can be removed without damaging the brick. I don't know if there's plans, if there's specific plans at this stage in design, so that's something that I can bring back to the project team. But it is quite possible.
Thank you, Natalie. I just want to commend the applicant for taking on this project and looking at some of our industrial history and keeping the shell of that particular building and the house next to it and retrofitting and putting it into reuse. Good example. My only question is, the color gray, is there a reason why you have chosen gray and maybe a lighter color than gray to complement the lower part of the brick wall?
No, and I appreciate that comment, Madam Chair, because I think sometimes this is where those architectural renderings do us no justice in terms of understanding what the materials will actually look like. So ideally, the next time that we come back to this committee, we'll have renderings that better reflect the exact colors.
Thank you very much. I have a question too about the windows. Granted, the windows on the front, the present ones, are they wood framed or are they steel framed or what are they right now?
So I believe they are wood framed. Yeah. So the ones on the front are the original.
I understood and understand your need for the windows along the side, changing of the orientation. Is there a reason why you would change the ones at the front?
So the ones in the front, from a design perspective, there's a desire to have the continuity throughout the building, but then there also are privacy concerns with the existing windows being so open.
I think I did read the original plan for this, and I was quite excited to see that the wood windows or a sampling of them would be maintained. So perhaps there's a way that you can see fit to do it in the project to make it an extra good example to the community. And there are, through Mohawk College, there have been studies as to how to do this, but I'm sure the applicant has ideas on this one. Thank you. So yes, Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. I didn't see Mr. Mancini sitting over there until I looked over. I just want to comment on, I concur with Councillor Chapman. I'm really happy to see this project come. I think it was a long time coming and a lot of work has been put in and will be put in the future, and we are certainly in need of more affordable housing. So this is terrific.
Thank you, Councillor Michaud. Peter, you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I just want to make one brief comment. It's a terrific proposal, and I want to give extra credit for trying to achieve net zero I mean, it's, you know, it's great, the rehabilitation of the historic buildings, but to actually set that bar so high to try and achieve net zero, good luck and well done.
Thank you, Peter. Well said. All right. Any other comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. And now, our questions or comments for staff. Oh, sorry, Robin. Yes.
I was just going to say, for the staff, I agree with what's been said in terms of working in the nonprofit sector and knowing how much extra work has gone into this type of proposal, because we often don't have access to the same resources that the big developers do.
Thank you, Robin. Well, with that, we wish the applicant well, and it looks like it's the community is behind this project as well, so we'll watch with great anticipation. Thank you. And now I'd like to call on Diksha and Jessica to share with us the workload and our project for the coming months and the report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as we know, on November 28th, 2022, Bill 23 received royal assent, resulting in amendments to several key pieces of legislation related to land use planning, including the Ontario Heritage Act. These amendments for the OHA came into effect on January 1st, 2023. They've been outlined in the work term report that was submitted, as well as here. It's just a broad overview. And I think the one that we're identifying as being the biggest concern that needs to be addressed is the designation of listed properties within 2 years of being included on the Municipal Heritage Register. So the City of Kitchener aims to conserve its cultural heritage resources through their identification, protection, use, and/or management in such a way that their heritage values, attributes, and integrity are retained. To meet this objective, while responding to the amendments introduced to the OHA through Bill 23, we're looking to streamline our designation process. And that's what we are proposing in this work plan to you today. So we're looking at evaluating and recognizing the listed properties that are currently on our register to identify those that are most worthy of designation. This involves the research and evaluation to determine if they meet the criteria of Ontario Regulation 569/22 for designation, which has replaced the previous regulation. So we are looking for the committee's help in evaluating. We currently have approximately 230 properties on our register, which is a lot for 2 people to handle. So we're looking for the committee's help in reviewing these properties. The work is to commence as soon as possible for a recommendation, and we're looking at reviewing 5 to 10 properties per month to meet an overall goal of at least 80 properties by January 1st, 2025. We have updated the evaluation form that's used to evaluate these properties, which Diksha will expand upon further.
Thank you, Jessica. So as Jessica mentioned, we've prepared an updated cultural heritage evaluation form with updated criteria for determining cultural heritage value according to the amended Ontario Regulation 569/22. Essentially, the province has gotten rid of the 3 main criteria and sub-criteria, and there are now 9 main criteria for determining cultural heritage value. According to the changes proposed through Bill 23, for a property to be listed as a non-designated property on the city's Municipal Heritage Register, the property must meet 1 or more criteria, but for a property to be designated under the Ontario Heritage Act, it must now meet 2 or more criteria of the Ontario Regulation 569/22. As part of updating the evaluation form, staff have also included additional criteria that we want evaluated for these listed properties. The city wants to move towards a more equitable approach towards heritage conservation, and staff want to start working towards considering a more holistic approach towards heritage conservation. There are questions within the additional criteria that touch topics such as climate change, equity, and diversity, and through this, staff are hoping this would be a starting point in achieving a more equitable approach. Staff are looking for the committee's input, which will be taken into consideration as we finalize this evaluation form. The finalized form will then be used to evaluate listed properties by the committee and staff starting next month. Thank you. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much, Jessica and Diksha. I wonder if the chart, which you presented, the work plan, if that could be part and parcel of the minutes, could have that. I think it was a nice capsule of what we are going to do and to keep it as a reminder with the minutes. All right, I'm going to open for questions now. It's a lot to absorb. And yes, Peter.
Yeah, I've got some questions about the numbers of buildings. So how many buildings in total are going to be part of the review?
So through you, Madam Chair, we've decided on designating or not designating at least 80 properties by 2025.
Okay, but the total number of properties in the sort of pool to review, how many are there?
230 approximately.
230?
Yep.
Okay. So at 10 a month, right, 120 a year, that's the top end, right? 2 years is 240 properties. So at the end of 2 years, we have 240 properties reviewed. But the review is just the most preliminary step in the movement towards designation. How did you come up with a target of 80 properties out of that total that is the number that should be designated?
Yes, so through you, Madam Chair, the number 5 to 10 that we chose is sort of 10 being the best case scenario, that members of the committee can go out there, do the evaluations, and staff can do further review of those, and then come back with a recommendation as to whether that property should be designated or not. We're trying to focus on the properties that are most worthy of designation, and we're aiming for at least 80. If more than 80 properties are evaluated, that would be a good outcome. But as a base point, we're trying to make a decision on at least 80 of the most important properties that we should be looking at in terms of designation.
Okay. So after the property is evaluated and then it's said yes that this is a candidate for designation, then the owner of that property then is intention to contact them and bring them along in supporting in the process?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, that is the intention. We are going to start reaching out to owners of listed properties and informing them of the upcoming work plan that the committee will be undertaking. And the designations, to the best of our ability, are going to be done on a rolling basis. So each month we would be coming back with at least a few or a batch of properties that we think committee should make a recommendation on to go to council.
So it's a continuous process of bringing forward properties, getting the cooperation of the owner, bringing them forth to council for designation.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Just in the Gantt chart that I kind of draw in my head of this process, right, it seems that the review of the properties has to happen quicker than the sort of 5 to 10 a month pace, you know, because the candidate at the very end of the list, right, will run out of time.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, we will definitely take that into consideration. I think we had also considered the resources of the committee and how much time the committee would have. If there is space to have more than 10 properties evaluated every month by the committee, then that is something we can look into.
Thank you. Just to add to what Ms. Chowdhury is saying through the chair, so this is work that's in addition to our already heavy heritage workload. So this is work that we are reprioritizing, work that we're doing. So there is, as you note, once properties are identified, if it proceeds to designation, that's an additional amount of work as well. We're taking a very conservative estimate. We would rather be conservative in our estimate and exceed that goal than to not meet our goal. So the team has been looking at a prioritization exercise, keep in mind that properties that are very likely going to be subject to development application, that we can do a review of that proposal outside of this process. And we have the right to do that and require heritage impact assessment, and that responsibility and work doesn't fall on the Heritage Committee or our team. The review process does. So, and we have abilities to designate beyond the 2-year window if something is subject to development application. So we are trying to take our best effort guess at if we were to move on 80 out of the over 200 in the next 2 years, which would be significantly faster than any other review we've ever done, and it would be more designations than we've ever done before. So while I appreciate the sentiment that it's not the full 200 and so, 80 is still a pretty significant achievement in my opinion.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Garrett. 80 properties, in my opinion, is quite significant for designating when in the past maybe we've had 3-4 a year over all the years. So it's be interesting to see how this goes ahead and how we're going to do it. Other questions? Councillor Chapman.
I guess my question was, in terms of designating these properties, how, I don't know if I'm putting the horse before the cart, but in terms of like reaching out to these homeowners, like what does this process look like from your standpoint? I guess like are we just sending like a package to these, like to the folks and saying like, we would like to designate your property, or are we door knocking? Like, do we take a personal approach? Because I feel like, you know, having a more like holistic approach to these homeowners might better serve us, but I also just don't know what that looks like for you guys.
Through you, Madam Chair, we're still deciding on how we're going to do that. Previously, letters have been sent out in the mail to owners of listed properties, but we're still working on how to best do that with the time crunch that we have.
To add to that, if I may, Madam Chair, we would also be open to the recommendations from the members of the previous Promoting Cultural Heritage Subcommittee. If they have any advice or any ideas on how we might best approach that, we would be open to hearing those.
Thank you, Shannon, for raising that point. It's all about communication and all about establishing rapport with the owners. And it will be interesting to see how we go about this. It would really help if each of us knew of a property that was in that high priority list and maybe knew of the owner, and maybe in pairs go have a talk with that person over a cup of coffee or something of that sort. To do 80 that way, we'll have more than milkshakes. Okay, any other questions, comments? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, I was just wondering what will be or is being done with the work that the subcommittee did. Like this, you know, there were properties that we said, no, we're not going to worry about that one, we're going to worry about this one, and I mean, there was a lot of work done, and I realize the parameters have changed slightly, but what will be done with that information?
So through you, Madam Chair, the work that has already been done by the designation subcommittee, which evaluated approximately 30 properties, so me and Jessica and I are going to be doing a further review of those properties. So this committee will not be going out there and doing any updated evaluations. Our hope is to to assess a few of those properties that have already been evaluated against this new criteria, bring them back to the committee next month in that updated cultural heritage evaluation form. So that the committee can see how, once the committee starts going out and evaluating properties themselves, how it should be done. So that's how we're going to be furthering the work of the designation subcommittee. For the Promoting Cultural Heritage Subcommittee, we're going to be asking their help in terms of reaching out to the owners and how best to do that. Our hope is to build on the work that the subcommittees have already done in this process that we're going to undertake. What that's going to look like, we still need to solidify that, but we've started to work on how we're going to best achieve that.
Okay, I appreciate that. The other question that I would ask, and we talked about this in the coffee shop, actually. 500 pages to prepare for a meeting of Heritage is a lot. And if we're piling more work onto committee members, maybe we should be compensating people, or I don't know. I don't know how to best address this, but if we're going to be getting this much to do every month, it's going to be far too much, I think. Just an observation.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. I have a question about those 30 properties that were recognized by the Heritage Designation Committee. Were these 30 properties evaluated against the chart that we originally had?
Through the chair, yes. They were evaluated using the previous heritage forms that were there.
All right, so there is an evaluation done, all right, all right. Of those 30 buildings, how many would be municipal buildings?
Through the chair, I'm not sure, but I can get back to you on that.
Right. It seems to me that municipal buildings might be a good way to start, and to look at sort of the longevity of these buildings and where they are. Granted, we will be having to deal with councils for those municipal buildings. And even councils have their preferences and non-preferences for designation. So also I think if they're municipal buildings, we have to consider, shall we say, facility staff, attitudes towards preservation, what is forecast for those municipal buildings. It plays a big role as far as my experience goes with municipal buildings. Any other comments? Yes, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, just a quick one. Is it possible to, for staff or for Peter to share the file that from the subcommittee with the rest of the committee? Or has it already been shared?
I've turned over all the material to staff as part of the...
So can it be shared with us just so we can see the work that has been done? And, members of the committee might have comments on it?
Through the chair, yes, we can circulate it by email.
I think that would be a very good suggestion. That is a very good suggestion and a good place to start, especially since the committee of last year's has really taken its time and sifted all the information. Eloni, you have some comments or questions?
So in preparation to get the community ready for being approached about designation, has there been any thought to perhaps public service announcements or something to let people know this is coming so that when they are approached, that they understand the purpose and so that it's not a cold call? That would maybe be my suggestion. Also, has there been any priorities given to any of the properties that are on the list? I'm thinking of 16 to 20 Queen Street and how that was such a gem. And, are there other properties of that character or of that quality that maybe we should look at first to make sure that, we get the jewels first, just to make sure that we don't forget any of the prime properties that we have?
So through you, Madam Chair, staff are currently undertaking a prioritization exercise. As part of that, we will be first looking at the properties within the downtown because there seem to be the greatest concentration of them. After that, we will look at other strategic areas as the review process goes on. So we are putting a list together that we intend to share with the committee soon.
One more question. So I just want to understand the commitment that you're asking from the committee. Are you actually looking for additional time outside of this group to do additional work on identifying and evaluating, or is it all within the committee?
Through you, Madam Chair, we are asking for the committee to go out and do evaluations that would be outside of the normal meeting time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alona. Natalie, please.
Yes, I was just wondering if also there is preference given to non-residential buildings, maybe community buildings and all that for designation first rather than individual private property.
Through you, Madam Chair, we can definitely take that into consideration.
Thank you, Natalie. Any other comments or directions? Well, just to conclude, I wish you well. Your work is cut out. And if some of those 30 properties, if that can be circulated or shared, I suppose we have to be mindful that we're not sort of stepping on toes of owners and that. And so when you circulate it, it's, you know, these are the properties that have been evaluated and looked at.
So, Madam Chair, it is our intention to develop an opportunity for us to be able to share information digitally. So we're working to develop a secured digital resource where we can file shared materials and we can when we're done evaluations, we can put copies of the forms. So we are working on that. There is some parameters about ensuring that we can ensure that it's confidential and secure, but still provide access to everyone on the committee. So we're looking at that. We are continuing to develop the prioritization exercise, and we're committed to this work for the next 2 years, and we're not saying that it's not flexible or that we can't revisit some of the prioritization criteria as we start to undertake this work. We also recognize that we're asking you for commitments outside of what you've already volunteered to do on this committee, and there may be opportunities for some members of the committee to do that at certain times of year, and maybe there's not that same opportunity all the time. So again, we want to build in a plan that's flexible, but ultimately we see this as an opportunity of taking the work that was started through the various subcommittees, bringing that forward, and sort of meeting the challenge that the province has put us in with regard to reviewing everything on our registry. And then, you know, we'll continue to revisit this, and if there are additional legislative changes that will come up through additional provincial directives, then if there's an opportunity to give us a little bit more time, then we will obviously continue to champion for that.
Thank you, Garrett. Alona made a very good point about, shall we say, promotion or awareness or media release. And one of the places that areas where news columns are always being looked for, it's in the Kitchener Citizen East and West. And I know the councillors have their little columns, is it a monthly paper? And so this might be an opportunity, and I could, as chair of the committee, write an article about designation generally and the values of it, and with that kind of context. And staff, I would have you look at it and see how we move from there. But just a bit of information. I know that the two editors are always looking for heritage items, and they've requested any articles that you wish to put in. So I think that's one way it's one area that we could spread the word on this. So
Yeah, so I'm hearing that idea today from you, Chair, and we have some ideas as well. So typically when we undertake a project, we also work with our communications team to develop a communications plan. So when I spoke to implementing some of the work of the Promotion of Cultural Heritage sub-working group, it's taking those positive messages and incorporating it into either messaging that we do through social media or sharing certain information, updating our website. But what we want to do is ensure that we centralize all the communications through our known channels and through our communications team to make sure that we're consistent and that we're always directing people to the most appropriate and updated resources.
Thank you, Garrett. Robin?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, just as a suggestion, since this is my IMO and something that I am paid to do in my spare time, or my real time, is whether or not in planning for this, the Heritage Committee could also get, I'm sorry, I'm using my actual official words for this because I hate comms jargon, but like official talking points, like some clear direction in terms of, it's the type of thing that I would send out with a canvasser if they were representing my candidate, clear talking points and then clear information in terms of who is responsible for various questions, so that way if, for example, you send me and I go and knock on someone's door because I assess the situation and realize that is the best way to do it, not saying it always will be, but that's when you're doing voter outreach, you know that. That when that person knocks and wants more information, I have the proper path to direct them to and specific talking points that have been vetted by the city communications folks.
Thank you, Robin. Any other? Yes, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I just, I know the local ACO had worked with students, I don't know, last term or the term before, maybe last year for the whole year. And I know they were looking at designation opportunities as well. And I was just wondering, is this an opportunity to reach out to them and see the information that they've compiled as well? I mean, I guess, you know, that we don't want to be duplicating work. And I don't have their information available to my, I mean, they haven't shared their information with me, but I don't know if they've shared it with you, but I think that's something that we should certainly try to incorporate into the process, if they're willing to share it.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Any other questions, comments? I think staff, you have a good overview of where the committee is at. Thank you. All right, then we'll proceed to subcommittee updates, which I think I'll just move on because I don't anticipate that anybody has anything to report. If so, holler now. Thank you. Status updates, Heritage Best Practices Update 2023 Priorities, Impact Assessments. Diksha or Jessica, do you have anything to add there?
No, Madam Chair.
No, thank you. Any comments from the committee? Okay. Any information items? Don't forget that the third Monday in February is Heritage Day, known as Family Day. It might be a good time to promote the idea of what is heritage designation and what are its benefits. The heritage permit application tracking sheet. Anything to comment on that?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Diksha. All right. I neglected to introduce one of the members that is new and is here for the first time. Andrew, would you like to give us an overview of Andrew?
Sure, thank you. Hello, everybody. My name's Andrew. I am a mechanical engineer in my profession. I work for Walter Fady here in Kitchener. and excited to be part of this group and looking at what we're doing in the city of Kitchener.
Thank you, Andrew. And welcome. You know where to call our staff if you have questions, and Mariah. You can email me anytime. Thank you. All right, who would like to adjourn the meeting? Councillor Chapman, thank you very